Thank you very much, and welcome to our next panel on Greener by Choice, Nudging Towards Sustainable Consumption. And Tanya, let me just set us up for success. We're going to solve a man-made problem.
Exactly.
Great. So just to start us off, let's talk a little bit. I'm trying to connect from the previous panel. We heard some really interesting things about there being a perception bias and we need to change the status quo, and that young people have a voice but not the means. So let's talk about everyone who has the means and how are we as consumers making decisions that would help drive towards more sustainable consumption, sustainable choices, and just generally help us move the needle on sustainability. Most climate pathways, most of the things we've been talking about with businesses assume price, risk, opportunity. We want a cleaner energy, better technology, but we're also assuming things that I'm here to test with you. Are we assuming that we're going to change the way we travel, the way we heat our homes, eat, buy, what we wear? There's a stubborn gap between what we say we want to do and what we actually do. So let's talk today about those practical consumer-facing decisions. How are firms making greener choices easier, more affordable, but also where are those gaps? What is the challenge here? Where are we not being able to overcome some of those barriers? So with that, I'd love to welcome our esteemed panel here. We've got Tanya Larsen, Chief Executive and Founder at questionZERO. Welcome, Tanya. Will Silverwood, former Head of Sustainability at Whitbread. Welcome, Will. And John Thomas, Global Sustainability Director, Transformation and Engagement at Decathlon. All right, so with that, let's jump right into understanding and diagnosing this gap. And correct me if I'm wrong and if you don't agree with the statement, but what I said earlier, which is people always or often say they care about sustainability, but when it comes to really making those decisions, they don't change behavior. Is that true in your experience? And if so, what's the biggest blocker here? Tanya, maybe I'll ask you to start.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, actually. And I guess our business idea of questionZERO came out from the incidental noticing that customers actually care about sustainability if it's in front of their face. Because we were running vouchers and discounts websites for a while, and prices, discounts, buy one, get three, or stuff like that. And then it was a little bit of a glitch in the system. So because we were like CO2 neutral as a website, the CO2 neutral thing went on a consumer, like a brand page accidentally in a place that was sort of implying that brand was CO2 neutral. And we noticed that there was uplift on sales on it. And then we said to the guys, remove it, whatever. It was not correct. But it was like this glitch that made us to look at the whole thing. And then we started to look at the solution, that we obviously created. But the point of it, there is indeed a gap between intention and the purchase behavior. It's very true. But I think from what we see, it's just consumers were not given enough chance to know what they're buying quickly, correctly, and at the point of purchase.
So, Tanya, you're saying the information is missing for consumers. Will, is that your experience, or do you disagree entirely?
So, just to be clear, Whitbread doesn't brew any beer anymore. It's Premier Inn. So we have 1,000 hotels. And nudging for us kind of exists in two spaces. One is can we encourage our guests to stay with us? And the other is when they're in the hotel, how can we encourage them to do things differently? The heavy lifting in our business is done by infrastructural investment, but there is definitely a marginal change that can build up over thousands of people doing things differently. From a booking perspective, what we do know is that they care about things that are very simply communicated. So forget about net zero and ESG and targets. It's things that they understand around lower energy. It's things about provenance in the supply chain. It's things about looking after our staff. And that resonates with our guests. But the key thing there is how we surface that, because it can't be clumsy in a booking flow, sort of banners saying we do this kind of stuff. So we need to be kind of aligned with our brand approach. In the UK, we have a direct only booking. So they come to us, they're going to book with us. There's a hotel anywhere. In Germany, which is a growing market, there's competitive green leaf type approach. So we're confronted, customers will see us against Motel One,
right.
for example, on Booking.com, and we have to match their, green credentials, and that does make a difference.
So it's kind of corroborating what Tanya was saying, which is if you have the same options on the same page, consumers will go towards the greener one. Yeah. And I want to come back to that in terms of convenience choice messaging. But John, over to you.
Yeah, so Decathlon, world's largest sporting good retailer. We're 1,900 stores in 70 countries. So we interact with a lot of consumers and a lot of different types of consumers in all sorts of markets. And what we see generally is that, yes, customers do say they care about sustainability, but they don't, as Tanya was saying, it doesn't often motivate purchase for two main reasons. One is price. They say they can't afford it. And the other is information. They don't have comparable information at the point of sale to decide between different options. And so when we think about what we try to communicate to consumers around sustainability, we really do lead with this point around price, but we tend to think of it more as value. When you come to Decathlon, what do you want? You want value for money. How does sustainability integrate into the value that you're getting out of the product, whether that's price, that's quality, that's performance, and then also sustainability.
Yeah. I'm going to make sure that we have obviously some time for questions at the end, but also if we could have the Slido up so you can share questions as we go through, because that's always more fun and engaging. So price and information, that's interesting, because information is something all three of you have highlighted. What kind of information is helpful when consumers are making some of these decisions? John, maybe I'll go this way.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for us, it gets to why are they coming in the door in the first place and what do they want to know about? So we think about sustainability attributes. Let me take a step back. We used to communicate our own individual eco-design label to say this product is eco-design, this product is not. And customers, in many cases, did choose the eco-design product. 1 out of every 2 euros we sell is eco-designed at Decathlon. That said, the kind of on-off doesn't really emphasize that point around values that I was making. So what we've done, our research on our customers, the things that they care about more than just kind of whether or not this product is eco-design are things like sustainable materials, country of origin, where it's made, particularly in Europe, and durability, so that when they buy something, they know it's going to last. And luckily, what we do in sustainability relates to all three of those things.
Yeah. And if your products were achieving all these outcomes, but one was more expensive, the sustainable one was more expensive, would you see that consumers wouldn't actually pay for it? Is that your experience?
Well, I think when we think about how to integrate sustainable attributes into our products, not just from a consumer standpoint, so we want to integrate more sustainable materials. So 80% of what you see in a Decathlon store is designed by engineers and product designers at Decathlon. It's our own brand. So we have an immense amount of control. So when we empower those designers to go back to the drawing board to think creatively about how to integrate sustainability into the product, we actually find that they find cost savings in terms of less materials, that it actually can increase our margins, or we sell more of the product. So it's a more holistic view on sustainability, not just as an added cost, but when we think about how do we make better products that enable our customers to get that value, sustainability often helps make our products, keep our products affordable and better.
Yeah.
So.
Will, can I ask you to chime in here in terms of information?
I think for us, the big area of opportunity is B2B. So half of our guests are business guests, and half of those guests are booked through business bookers. And we're their scope 3, and they demand, or they ask for, qualitative stuff around renewables and around how our menus are made up and how we source things. But also, if we provide them intensity of the rooms, then we know that through some of the aggregator platforms, we get a 15% uplift. So that's a really important area. I think the other area which is very different to Decathlon is the experience. So, food waste, in-room, towel change, recycling in room, all these things by design need to be really simple to communicate and not feel like we're kind of guilting guests. But, it was mentioned earlier by Catherine Dalton from IHG, a single guest towel not being changed could probably reduce, we reckon, I've done this, fag packet, 7,000 tons of CO2 a year for us. And so that's marginal by guest, but sort of macro by by scale, and that's just a little sign in the bathroom.
Yeah. Tanya?
I guess we are in a slightly more difficult position because we are not like individual consumer brand ourselves. So our broad e-commerce audience have attention of a goldfish, right? So you only have like 3 seconds attention span to put something in front of them. So I think where we come from is we are very lucky to collaborate with University of Exeter and a free student labor, actually. They have a really good program on that. And we did lots of consumer research. And yes, indeed, product quality and durability comes up kind of very high, but also generally what they call like business practices, environmental business practices, and social part. It's obviously everybody knows the scandals about the child labor and whatever.
Yeah.
Those are pretty much kind of key elements where we are structuring our assessment. But then in terms of how you communicate it, I mean, again, we are a marketing tool, right? So we went through the route of scoring, right? Everybody knows hotels 5-star scoring, so whatever, right? Or Trustpilot scoring and so on. So it took us a long time actually to get to this. And we have the scoring that has a really catchy sort of attention. But behind the scoring, they can look where it comes from. And yes, all those elements, we try to drill them down and people can see reports on it.
Now, are we overwhelming consumers? It's a controversial question with some of this data and some of this labeling. John?
Absolutely. I mean, the product environmental footprint regulation in Europe and France's new eco score has 16 criteria that they want us to be able to communicate to consumers, which we don't communicate 16 product attributes across any product. So, I think there's absolutely a need for something that is more standardized and comparable. One of the things that we're trying to keep as a red line or a red thread through all of our products, regardless of what we communicate through PEF, is just CO2 footprint as something that they can use as a reference. Whether or not that's adapted at an EU scale, I don't know. But I think at a minimum, that's what we want to be able to communicate on every product. It's not necessarily going to be the main thing we communicate, but it will be available. And then if consumers are more interested in more detail, can scan a QR code to go to a product displayed page that has more information on many of the other criteria. So
you're filtering through by making it simple in the beginning and then filtering through people who actually want more.
Yeah. Because I think we assume that customers want this information, and in some cases they do, but most customers just want to feel better about what they're purchasing, right?
Yeah.
So how do we do that in a way that is ethical and transparent while also not overwhelming customers with information that's not useful?
Yeah, Will, you want to jump in? Yeah.
Well, part of my role is to try and choose our battles and make sure we can push for environmental progress. And the first thing you have to do when you're changing consumer behavior in the hotel is get through the brand team.
Yeah.
And they test in an incredibly robust way guest scores, and we'll put in some messaging and see what the change is. And if there's any drop in guest scores, either because of the change they make or because of the feeling they get from the messaging, the thing gets flawed. It doesn't go out into the room. So I don't think we do overwhelm the guests, but we have to fight really hard to get messaging through because they protect the brand above all else.
Tanya, you were talking about a consolidated score almost. Is that kind of part of it? But again, going deeper when you want to?
Yeah, it's the same thing about what we call conversion rates, right? So if you overload the consumers, they can be distracted from initial intention to purchase and so on and so on. So we also went through this A/B testing effectively, right? So you put something, and if you imagine, let's say the Google search, right? Everybody uses, and we have this very limited space of the product listings on it. So it's the first attention as the image, the second attention as the price, the third is offer or discount or whatever. So very little space to put anything on sustainability on it. But if you put a little dot or scoring or whatever on it, at least it catches the attention, and then consumers can look and kind of read more about it and so on, but it does not distract them from the initial kind of attention flow.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
There's some interesting questions here around why are unsustainable products still positioned as cheaper? And when do you think this shift will happen? Sustainable should be cheaper. Well, first, are do you agree that unsustainable products are positioned as cheaper? And yes, Tanya, you're not.
Yeah, I actually wasn't here about 3 years ago, and I was really told off afterwards when I said that meat shouldn't be cheap. I actually said that from the stage because sustainable meat cannot be cheap, right? So this is the reality, I guess. But again, I mean, there is a degree of sustainability, and let's be honest, it's a difficult world, and a lot of people don't have enough money. But it's about education. Like I say, you buy one expensive pair of shoes, or I guess mid-range or whatever, and you wear them for 2 or 3 seasons, or you buy 25 pairs from Shein that die out in a month, everyone. So it's about how you position it.
And that we're not pricing in externalities. I think that's what it really comes down to. John, Will, anything to add, or your opinion there? Do you think that we're pricing unsustainable products cheaper?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a point around, pricing and externalities, to use that more technical term. But I do think if we think about what our task is as sustainability professionals, like if sustainability is only going to be accessible to rich people, we will not succeed. So we have to make sustainability affordable. What does that look like? In some cases there are costs, but for example, we started a collection of textile to textile recycling cotton t-shirts 2 years ago. Last year we sold 200,000, and this year 10% of all of our cotton fibers are recycled textile to textile recycled cotton fibers. It was much more expensive when we started it. That price is coming down. So you do have to think a bit long term about, okay, what's the long term value we want to create out of here? Because immediate choices in front of you might appear more sustainable or more expensive, but I think there is absolutely a path to integrate sustainability into everyday consumer products.
Yeah, it can't be a luxury item. Will, anything to add?
Well, the only thing to add is that we can keep our costs down by being sustainable around energy. We save a lot of water. We probably use, I think after the NHS, we are the second biggest user of laundry. It's huge. We've changed our shower heads. All this stuff saves us millions of pounds a year, which we can pass on.
Yeah. To the consumer. There's a question here for you as well. Do you find that people generally, I can read it out, follow these types of signs in hotels, for example? How effective are they?
I think by these type of signs, you mean kind of change behavior.
Changing behavior.
Well, I think, if you think about food waste, for example, for us, that's 10,000, tens of thousands of ton a year. And we can affect that. You can put messaging. You say things like, take what you want, but eat what you take. Or you can say, come back for more. Catherine was talking about smaller plates. So it's kind of about design. There are tricks. Things like, serve up less because we have buffets. If there's whole piles of sausages, people will take whole piles of sausages. You cook, less. And these are just sort of nudges. Engineering behavior is really difficult when you've got the brand team here. Yeah. You've got to be really careful.
Yeah.
But you can definitely change behavior. You've just got to be clever about it.
Yeah. I'm based in the US, so talking about big plates and large portion sizes it was quite a shock. Also, another thing that we're seeing in the US, of course, is a bit of this backlash, or just consumers thinking a little bit more skeptically about green claims, with regulation. How do you approach consumers, or how do you ensure that consumers find the claims that you're making trustworthy? Because that's really critical as well. We're facing this backlash. So, Tanya, maybe I'll ask you to start.
Well, we don't use green for starter.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
We have a whole page saying blue is new green, right? So our actual logo is blue. But I think it's all data verification. And on this journey, funny enough, the most difficult part was data and kind of legal liabilities that come with it. So we opted in actually paying huge amount of licenses, because nobody gives any discounts to sustainable companies, obviously, for the financial data. We use hardcore financial data providers to crunch the data and put it behind the scoring. And talking of US, we had presence in US, and you can be sued for everything. So for us, it was like a common sense cover that all the data is backed from official company reports. I mean, how a company report is obviously a different story. And consumer trust is hard to earn, but I guess in our case, we just try to be as neutral as possible. We don't ask brands to pay for reports, so you cannot get paid report. So it's neutral data. Just guys try to verify as much as possible in that sense.
Yeah, because are we playing on the heartstrings a little bit too much here? How do we manage that? Will, any thoughts?
I mean, our approach is just to be really, really simple. Just make sure that we don't use any terminology that is, ESG geek. It's just, would your granny get it? And just keep it really simple. And also from a governance perspective, we just make sure that we're really clear about how messages get out.
Yeah.
So that they come through, specialists of simple versus marketing people.
Marketing, right. Yeah. John.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we've had a lot of lessons on this. I mean, we've faced, regulator complaints in the Netherlands, for example, about that eco-design label. I think for us, the key learning is that knowing something and proving something are two different things. And so when we make claims to consumers, we need to be able to prove them. And so that means that we are making fewer claims, but the claims are more meaningful because we know that we can tell you where this recycled material comes from and it has a clear chain of custody. And so because of that, we've gone from kind of broader claims to very more specific claims around eco-design versus recycled material or things like that. So
I want to take questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll keep going with the Slido. Anyone want to not be anonymous? All right. Okay. I don't see any hands. Also, another interesting question, and I guess maybe for all three, let's see if this goes. But is there any discernible difference between consumer sustainability-related preferences when purchasing online versus in person? I think it comes to the guilt question here, Will. Do we see anything different when you're buying in person and or from your website directly or something where there's a little bit more of a guilt angle?
Well, everyone buys from us
online.
Yeah. We don't have.
But direct to your website versus.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the big difference really online is the business booker versus the consumer. Booker,
yeah. Tanya, any thoughts on that one? I mean, everything's online.
I live online for the last 23 years, so I don't remember buying anything in person.
Never really. All right, John, then that one's for you. In-store versus online.
Yeah, I think, why do people come into a Decathlon store versus online is they want advice. And they want advice from someone that's knowledgeable, friendly, helpful. And so we find that maybe not necessarily with sustainability particular, but that experience in store is really what keeps people coming back to us. So those customers that come to us in store are more loyal than an online customer.
But that doesn't necessarily translate into any sustainability linked decisions.
I would say what's been tough for us is how do we make sure that our sales associates are able to communicate the sustainability attributes. They see the eco-design labels on the products, but being actually able to say, I'm not wearing them today, but I usually am. Our pair of Kip Next running shoes is the first glueless running shoe, and it's up there along the 10 other running shoes that we sell, and it's 50% more cushioning, 30% less CO2 emissions, and no glue in factories, right? So if you're choosing between two running shoes and you have that story to tell, that's a great story, and it's at the same price point. So for us, the difference is really the human advice piece that we haven't really cracked yet in store of how to make sure that the sustainability messages are being well communicated to customers that want that advice.
Another question that's been upvoted at the 10-year anniversary of the UN SDGs, the worst performing one was SDG 12, responsible consumption. Is regulation our last resort, and how do we change that trend? All right, John.
Yeah, I can start with this one, and it kind of connects to the next question about circularity, right? So when you think about a company like Decathlon, what does sustainability mean? Sustainability means better products and keeping them in use as long as possible. So the better product stuff I've talked about a bit, but the longest use possible, that's where circularity comes in. We're Europe's largest bike manufacturer. We're seeing incredible growth in secondhand rental repair of our bikes, which we call circular business models. And so for us, that's a key growth driver for us. It's also a way to connect to price conscious consumers and also to ultimately move us more in a direction of a away from a linear model where we're just selling and eventually something is becoming waste and towards a more circular model. For us, it's about 3% of our revenue now, which is not insignificant, but we're aiming for much more than that in the next 5 years because it's also growing rapidly. So it's a long journey towards a more sustainable model that offers services to keep products in life longer, but we're moving in that direction. So.
Anything around reversing the trend?
Well, I'm a big fan of regulation. I think that regulation is the only way to, I mean, for us, you know, DRS, the deposit return scheme, will force us to behave differently. Some of the new effective taxes around our waste stream management, again, will force us to be much better at that kind of stuff. And, you know, the reality is that's the way to create change. So I'm all for it.
Yeah. Tanya?
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously back and forth on the regulation on the consumer claims and so on. And the UK was meant to follow like harder rules of Europe, but it's all advisory and whatever. But I think it's, unfortunately, in a price-conscious environment and a whatever crisis is all over the place, I think it's time for the government to probably do a little bit more on regulations, at least in line with more advanced countries.
And what kind of regulations would you like to see?
And things like greenwashing, there was an earlier speech about it, that on one side, a lot of brands, and like I said, we've seen it on our own eyes, they get away with unsubstantiated claims
Right.
and unfairly compete on cheaper price that is sort of sustainable. Then it's just like unfair competition. So I think
more transparency
more
and
transparency.
more verification of claims. Anyone else in the audience? Any other questions? No one wants to raise their hand. All right.
Actually, good question about the Shein.
Yes. So I can read that out.
Yeah.
Q0 rates Shein a 7.8 out of 10. How is this possible?
This is actually a glitch on our scoring, just was going to say, because I got locked out of my email today and we had a little bit of a situation. So I was texting the guys earlier about it. I've seen it. Yeah. Sorry. This is a genuine error. Don't look at it.
It's an error. And another question here. An earlier session spoke about the impact of the EU's Empowering Consumer Directive and how difficult it is for companies to comply across the EU. Do you agree? John?
Oh my gosh. I'm American and moved to Europe a year and a half ago to work for Decathlon, and I am overwhelmed by the number of directives I have to be aware of on a daily basis. That's the first time I'm hearing of it. So I have no comment.
Okay, all right. Same. All right. Okay. I was going to say, Will, maybe you have a different take with regulation.
That's one that, I'm not looking forward to.
Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to pick up on the legislation point, like in France, we have a super activist government, and I say that in a good way in terms of pushing ambitious sustainability regulation. And what is going through now, it went through the French Assemblée Nationale, and now it's back in the EU Parliament because it was deemed to be anti-competitive, was an ultra-fast fashion law, basically seeking to regulate certain entrants that I won't name into the market around the number of references that they're putting onto the market, which exceeds by an order of magnitude anything else any other even fast fashion player is doing. So I think, that is the role of government to decide when is enough. And, we can do the best we can to provide choices to consumers. And at the same time, we need rules of the game that will level the playing field for all of us.
Yeah, I'm seeing some consensus here around, the role of the government, but also what you said around transparency and verification that needs to be something that's regulated. All right, we just have about a minute. So like a quick close from each of you. If every company here did one thing in the next 12 months to shift consumer behavior, or based on your experience, one thing that would make a difference in the next 12 months, what would it be? What would you advise people in the audience to do? Tanya, I'll start with you.
Yeah, ignore Shein for now, because I actually had this conversation with them in America, specifically ask how they can make a dress for £5. But in general, I think consumption actually drives the progress, right? So the production of stuff creates jobs, and we cannot all reuse the same underwear in cycle. So actually buying stuff is good, right? But I would say that just think what you buy, just literally pause like for 3 seconds instead of impulse purchase, right? And just like think about it. It may save you money as well, but just like pause, don't do the impulse purchasing thing.
I think just be transparent, keep it simple. Just be really clear about what it is you're trying to communicate and
Yeah.
get rid of the jargon.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Less marketing speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
John?
And I would think more like big picture, how do we move from using guilt as a motivator to participation, right? Like we need to create a positive vision for a sustainable future that we want to bring people along, that people want to participate in, and guilt is not a motivator for that.
Yeah.
So.
All right. With that, thank you very much, Tanya, Will, John, for a really interesting discussion. I think we've got some interesting takeaways, and simple, meaningful, but not too much, fewer and more meaningful, as you said, right? Please join me in thanking our panel for a really interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.